So, um, everyone kind of assumes that the intern is going to be the first one to lose their job to AI, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the cliche.
Yeah, like we picture this fresh college grad or maybe the entry-level data entry clerk, the person doing all the grunt work. We just imagine them getting a pink slip handed to them by a robotic arm or something.
Right.
But what if the data actually shows that the CEO and the intern are, well, relatively safe? And it's the $150,000 a year middle manager who is just squarely in the crosshairs.
I mean, it completely flips the script on what is probably the most common, just creeping anxiety in the modern workforce right now.
Seriously.
We all watch these viral tech demos online, right? Like a piece of software, writing a complex legal brief, or, coding a website from scratch, or generating this flawless presentation in 3 seconds flat. And we just immediately extrapolate that into our own obsolescence.
Oh, yeah, and it totally makes sense why we panic. You see a machine do something that you spent like 4 entire years in college learning how to do, and your stomach just drops. But here's the thing. Obsessing over a demo that shows what an AI can do, well, it doesn't actually tell you what a company will do.
Exactly.
Because the real decisions about your job, about all of our jobs, they aren't being made by software developers in research labs. They are being made in corporate boardrooms by executives looking at spreadsheets and risk models.
That's the reality check people need.
So today, for you listening, we are going on a deep dive into an incredibly insightful framework by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled, When Will AI Replace You? And it is basically the economic blueprint of how organizations actually make these automation decisions.
It's such a fascinating read.
It really is. So our mission today is to shortcut that anxiety you might be feeling, cut through the sci-fi hype, and equip you with the actual math happening behind the scenes. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right, so we really have to start by separating the technology from the economics here.
Makes sense?
Yeah, because moving from the hype of a technology's capability to the actual math of workforce replacement, it just changes the entire conversation. Just because an AI is capable of doing something, even if it does it way better than a human, that doesn't mean the organizational math actually makes sense to deploy it.
Right.
The fundamental misconception most of us have is, well, thinking about replacement as this occupation-wide event, we think, oh no, the AI is coming for all the accountants.
Right, like an entire job category is just gone overnight.
Exactly. But in reality, substitution is deeply task-specific.
Meaning, a company doesn't just look at a job title, like accountant, and hit delete. They look at the maybe 50 different specific chores you do within that job title, and they evaluate them one by one.
Precisely. Because modern work isn't a monolith. It's a highly complex bundle of distinct activities.
Give me an example.
Well, take a financial analyst. You might picture them just sitting at a desk crunching numbers all day. But a huge part of their job involves extracting data from quarterly reports and inputting it into models. Now, that specific task, it's highly automatable right now.
Sure, AI can do that in its sleep.
Right. But that same analyst also spends time using complex compliance judgment, navigating regulatory constraints, and, actually explaining the nuances of that data to a skeptical client.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And AI struggles massively with the legal and interpersonal aspects of those tasks. So you cannot just automate the entire job overnight simply because you successfully automated the data extraction part.
Right, so you aren't replacing the analyst. You are just kind of shifting how they spend their Tuesday afternoon.
Yes, exactly.
Like you spend less time copying and pasting from PDFs and way more time actually talking to the client or double-checking their regulatory boundaries, which, that brings us to a really crucial piece of the source material.
The Banerjee and Singh study, right?
Yeah, exactly. The researchers Banerjee and Singh published a theoretical advance in 2026 that proved the decision to replace a human relies on one very specific metric, and it's called the risk-adjusted effective cost.
What's fascinating here is that technical capability is necessary, sure, but it is entirely insufficient on its own.
How so?
Well, think about a nominal licensing fee for an AI tool, say, I don't know, $20 a month per user. That means absolutely nothing to a corporation until they calculate the deployment costs, the cost of reliability failures, and the massive coordination overhead required to keep that system running without basically crashing the company.
So wait, is buying AI basically just like buying a really cheap, ridiculously fast sports car?
I love that analogy.
Like you walk onto the lot, And the sticker price, the software licensing fee, looks amazing. It's shockingly cheap.
Right.
But you can't just drive it off the lot. You have to factor in the insurance premiums.
Yeah.
And in this case, the insurance premium means the operational risks, the data security overhauls, the cost of fixing things when the AI hallucinates.
Spot on.
The sticker price is cheap, but the insurance premium is what actually bankrupts the company if they aren't careful.
The sticker price is an absolute illusion without the insurance premium, and that premium dictates the entire timeline of the AI revolution for a company.
Okay, so if I'm a business owner, I'm looking at this insurance premium and realizing I have to heavily factor in what happens if the machine gets it wrong. I'm guessing this risk penalty isn't just some one-size-fits-all number.
Not at all.
It has to look very different depending on what my company actually does. Right.
It looks wildly different. The framework breaks this risk penalty down into three main components that an organization has to constantly weigh:
Okay, what are they?
reliability risk, compliance risk, and reputational risk. How sensitive a specific company is to those three things dictates how fast they adopt AI. It completely explains the massive divide we see across industries right now.
Oh, that makes perfect sense of the landscape because we see software development companies and marketing agencies adopting AI at just light speed. They are generating code and copy all day long.
Yeah.
But then you look over at healthcare or legal services or public education, and they are lagging way, way behind, even though the AI is technically capable of, like, passing the bar exam or diagnosing a rare illness on a medical scan.
Right, because context changes the math entirely. Think about a logistics firm that decides to automate route optimization for its fleet of delivery trucks.
Okay.
If the AI hallucinates or makes a suboptimal choice, maybe a truck takes 5 minutes longer to drop off a package. They face virtually zero federal oversight for that, and certainly no medical malpractice liability.
So the risk penalty is incredibly low.
Exactly. But a healthcare provider deploying a diagnostic AI, the compliance and reputational risks are astronomical.
Because one hallucination could literally cost a life.
Yes, it could result in a massive lawsuit and completely destroy the hospital's reputation.
I noticed the source material referenced the OECD product market regulation indices, which, I mean, that sounds like a mouthful of economic jargon.
It does, yeah.
But when you actually look at what it tracks, it's just a global index of how heavily regulated different markets are. And it shows that highly regulated spaces like finance and healthcare require just mountains of compliance.
Mountains of it.
The compliance acts like this massive wall that the AI has to climb over. The technology has to be overwhelmingly cheap and flawlessly perfect to justify a hospital taking on that level of risk.
And this is where companies are realizing they actually have agency. They don't have to just sit around and wait for the technology to magically get less risky over the next decade.
Wait, what do you mean?
They are actively building internal governance infrastructure to mitigate the risk themselves.
So they are actively manipulating their own risk penalty, like they're deliberately lowering their own insurance premium so they can buy the sports car faster.
Yes, exactly. They are using tactics like model validation and red teaming, which is essentially this aggressive adversarial testing where you try to break the AI before it goes live.
Right.
That reduces their reliability risk. A fantastic example detailed in the research is JP Chase.
Oh, I read about that.
Yeah, they didn't just buy an off-the-shelf AI and let it run wild. They established this massive centralized model risk management function. So for high-stakes decisions, like credit approvals, they explicitly require what's called a human-in-the-loop design.
Meaning the algorithm can do the heavy lifting, like it can crunch the numbers and make a recommendation, but a human being has to physically click approve or override the final call.
Exactly. By capping their compliance exposure with that human safety net, JP can aggressively adopt AI in complex financial areas without taking on catastrophic regulatory risk. They successfully manipulated their own threshold.
Wow. Okay, so we've established which industries are moving first based on that risk penalty and how heavily regulated they are.
Right.
Now let's zoom in on the corporate org chart and see who is actually in the crosshairs within those companies. Because here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
We talked about this at the very beginning. The widespread assumption has always been that the blue-collar workers, the manual laborers, or the entry-level clerks are the first to go. But according to this research, that assumption is completely backwards.
Yeah, it's wild. We are seeing highly skilled, highly paid knowledge workers fall into what the research specifically calls the vulnerability zone.
Wow.
And it comes down to a structural economic reality regarding how human beings are compensated versus how machines operate.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, human wages grow exponentially with skill and experience. Think about what it takes to train a senior knowledge worker. It takes years of formal education, perhaps an expensive master's degree, and decades of on-the-job training.
Right, and their salary reflects that massive investment.
Exactly. But AI capability costs scale much, much differently.
The text mentions something called inference expense, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot in tech circles.
Mhm.
But to break that down for you listening, inference expense is basically just the cost of actually running the model every time you ask it to do something.
Yeah, it's the computing power required to generate the answer.
Right.
And here is the kicker with inference expense. Once a massive AI model is trained, which costs an absolute fortune up front, the cost to actually use it, that inference expense, is nearly constant.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It costs the machine roughly the same amount of computing power to do entry-level spreadsheet math as it does to perform complex, high-level analytical modeling.
So the machine scales cheaply, but human expertise scales expensively.
Yes. And this cost dynamic is driving a massive structural shift called organizational flattening.
Flattening.
Right, because AI is exceptionally good at handling the coordination, the reporting, the data summarization, and the exception handling tasks that typically eat up a middle manager's entire day.
Oh, I see.
Think about what a middle manager actually does. A huge portion of their time is spent collecting status updates from their direct reports, synthesizing that information, and then passing it up the chain to the executives.
Right, or approving PTO requests, balancing schedules, tracking project milestones, all of that.
Exactly.
If an AI can do all of that coordination instantly, it drastically increases what the framework calls a manager's span of control. So suddenly one manager doesn't need to oversee 5 people. They can comfortably oversee 20 because the AI is handling all the routine supervisory tracking.
The research points to Spotify's squad-based model as a great precursor to this shift.
Oh yeah, Spotify.
Long before generative AI hit the mainstream, Spotify minimized middle management by organizing work into autonomous, cross-functional squads that were supported by digital coordination tools. They flattened the hierarchy. And AI is going to put that flattening effect on steroids for every company.
Wait, let me challenge that core premise for a second.
Sure.
If cost pressure is the main driver of AI substitution because humans get exponentially more expensive as they move up the corporate ladder, shouldn't the CEO and the top executives be the easiest, most obvious targets?
It's a fair point.
I mean, if this is purely about saving money, why eliminate a team of middle managers making $100,000 when you can automate the CEO who is making $10 million a year?
It's the most logical question you could ask when looking at the math. I had the exact same thought when I first read the economic models.
Right.
But this is where the framework introduces a concept called the single crossing pattern.
Single crossing pattern.
Yes. Cost-based substitution pressure increases aggressively as you move up the hierarchy. The higher the salary, the more the company wants to replace you. But substitution feasibility hits a hard, impenetrable ceiling at the very top of the org chart.
Because of the risk penalty we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You cannot automate a CEO because of strategic accountability, regulatory compliance, and something called normative legitimacy.
Normative legitimacy. What is that exactly?
It basically means that society, regulators, and shareholders demand that a human being takes responsibility for massive corporate actions. If a company makes a catastrophic error, say they release a product that harms consumers or they commit massive financial fraud, the board of directors, the public, and the SEC cannot subpoena an algorithm. They cannot put a piece of software in front of a congressional hearing. They need a human neck on the line.
It's the ultimate liability shield. Executive accountability isn't just about leadership. It's about being the designated person who goes to jail if things go horribly wrong.
Precisely. A machine can't serve a prison sentence.
So if we map this out, cost pressure is highest at the top, but automation feasibility is lowest at the top.
Right.
On the flip side, cost pressure is lowest at the bottom. Entry-level workers are relatively cheap, but feasibility is high. So where do those two lines cross on the graph?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Middle management faces the absolute peak risk, combining high compensation costs with high automation feasibility.
And empirical data already backs this up, too. Revelia Labs published data in 2023 documenting disproportionate reductions in middle management positions specifically at AI adopting firms. It is a structural bullseye.
Okay, so if the math is that clear and middle managers are uniquely exposed, why aren't we seeing total corporate house cleaning?
Yeah.
Like, what is stopping a mid-sized accounting firm or a regional marketing agency from automating their entire management tier tomorrow morning?
The barrier to entry. AI adoption is heavily dictated by upfront fixed costs, which massively favor corporate giants.
Big surprise there.
Right. The research calls this dynamic deployment scale acceleration. Training a foundational AI model from scratch, or even deeply customizing an enterprise version for a massive company costs tens of millions of dollars. The infrastructure is staggeringly expensive.
Right.
But the marginal cost to replicate that AI across different departments is near zero. So if a massive global enterprise spends millions to train a model and then deploys it across 4 different internal business units, they just dropped their per task cost by 75%.
Oh, they're just splitting the massive dinner check 4 ways internally, or, 40 ways if they're big enough. Which means AI development is basically like building a billion-dollar theme park. The infrastructure, the roller coasters, the underground plumbing, buying the land, the liability insurance, all of that is incredibly expensive.
So expensive.
The only way you can possibly make the individual ticket price cheap enough for a family to afford is if you have millions of people walking through the turnstiles every single year to offset the initial build.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, AI adoption is actually a game of economies of scale. It creates massive platform effects that inherently reward the biggest players.
Makes sense.
Look at a company like Salesforce and their Einstein AI platform. They can amortize the astronomical development costs of their AI models over tens of thousands of enterprise clients. That scale creates a structural competitive moat that is nearly impossible for a smaller competitor to cross. Big companies can deploy AI cheaper simply because they're bigger.
Which raises a terrifying question for anyone running a small business.
Yeah, it does.
How on earth does a small mom-and-pop logistics company or a boutique law firm survive that math? If they can't afford to build their own billion-dollar theme park and they don't have enough employees to split the check, are they just doomed to fall behind the corporate giants?
Well, they aren't doomed, but they absolutely cannot act alone. Small firms have to rely on industry-level coordination to survive the math of deployment scale acceleration.
Industry-level coordination.
Yeah. The research highlights open source models and industry consortiums as the primary lifeline here. For example, look at what is happening in the pharmaceutical industry right now.
What are they doing?
You have smaller pharmaceutical companies that just cannot afford to build proprietary AI for drug discovery. So they are collaborating on open source drug discovery platforms.
Oh, wow.
They pool their resources, they share the development expenses of the AI, and they effectively create the scale they lack individually. Without that kind of deep cross-company coordination, smaller firms simply will not reach the substitution thresholds fast enough to stay cost competitive against the giants.
Man, this entire framework paints a pretty harsh economic reality for the everyday worker.
It's definitely a wake-up call.
We are talking about unyielding risk thresholds,
Right.
massive corporate scale advantages, and middle managers getting systematically squeezed out from the center of the org chart.
So what does this all mean for the person listening to this right now?
Yeah.
How do you actually adapt to this landscape without feeling completely helpless?
It requires a fundamental shift in how both workers and companies think about their relationship. The research talks about renegotiating the psychological contract of work.
Okay, the psychological contract.
Historically, the unwritten rule of the corporate world was employment security.
Right.
The deal was, you do a good job, you stay loyal to the company, you don't mess up, and you get to keep your job permanently until you retire. Well, that era is over.
Long gone.
The new paradigm that organizations need to adopt and that workers honestly need to demand is employability security. Okay, I have to be honest here. Employability security sounds like a very polite HR-approved way of saying, we're going to fire you eventually, but we'll pay for a 6-week coding boot camp on your way out.
I know.
It sounds like PR spin to make layoffs sound proactive.
I completely understand why it sounds that way, and in bad, short-sighted organizations, it will absolutely be weaponized exactly like that.
Right.
But true employability security, at least according to Westover's framework, isn't about pushing you out the door with a parting gift. It's about transparency. It's about an organization showing you the economic thresholds before they are crossed and actively migrating your skills into areas where the AI faces too high a risk penalty to operate.
Ah, so it's about migrating you into those highly regulated, expensive insurance zones we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You want to target what the text calls the contested zone for upskilling. You don't train your people in tasks where AI obviously already dominates, like basic coding syntax or synthesizing data reports.
Makes sense.
You train them just below the threshold where human beings are still cost competitive, and you deliberately push them into risk complementary tasks.
What does that actually look like in practice for a worker, though?
It means moving away from routine analysis and moving toward tasks involving deep client relationships, handling edge case complaints, complex ethical judgment, and cross-functional integration.
So highly human skills.
Exactly. The research highlights AT&T as a massive example of doing this right. They saw the writing on the wall regarding network automation and realized a huge chunk of their workforce was in the vulnerability zone. So they launched a $1 billion reskilling initiative.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. And they achieved over 50% internal mobility because they moved workers into those high-context, risk-complementary tasks before the substitution threshold was crossed. It wasn't a severance package disguised as training. It was proactive, aggressive adaptation.
And I imagine the way a company introduces this to their employees makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, a huge part of this is psychological framing. The text contrasts algorithm aversion, which is where workers naturally resist the tech out of fear for their livelihoods, with algorithm appreciation.
Okay.
If an organization frames AI solely as a cost-cutting replacement tool, workers will sabotage it, or at least quietly refuse to use it well. But if they frame it as a tool for capability augmentation and back that up with real employability security, it lowers the identity threat. Workers actually embrace the tool, they become exponentially more productive, and they secure their own ongoing value to the company.
So to bring this all together for you listening, surviving this AI transition isn't about trying to outcode a machine or work faster than an algorithm.
Definitely not.
If you try to compete on speed and data processing, you will lose that race every single time. Surviving is about understanding this risk-adjusted cost gap. It's about realizing how corporate scale changes the math behind the scenes. And ultimately, it's about proactively migrating your skills into those high-context, high-accountability zones that machines are simply too legally and reputationally risky to touch.
This raises an important question.
Let's hear it.
The research notes that to survive the automation wave and maintain their legitimacy in society, organizations will need to deliberately create human-centric tasks.
Okay.
These are roles explicitly centered around empathy, ethical judgment, and fostering a sense of belonging among employees and clients. But if we look historically at the last century of business, the corporate world has largely rewarded hard, routine analytical skills with high wages while treating empathy and connection as soft, unbillable skills.
That's so true.
So as AI completely commoditizes analytical intelligence, making it practically free, will the future economy actually know how to put a premium price tag on human connection, or will we have to completely reinvent how we value work itself?
That is a staggering thought to end on. From border math and risk penalties to the literal billable price tag of human empathy. It is something for all of us to seriously think about as we navigate this transition in our own careers. Keep looking for those high context zones, stay out of the middle management bullseye, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.